Welcome back. Well, 20 or even 10 years ago, it was just called getting your bell rung or seeing stars after a hard hit on the football field. But in recent years, our understanding of concussions and the science of studying them have both come a long ways. Here is Carla Metz.
For some, it's controversial. In the news, it's research versus opinion. It's something we can't physically see, but we know its presence by the side effects. You can almost hear it in a hit. You can feel it through a helmet.
A concussion is a brain injury caused by forces acting on the brain. It can be either a direct blow to the brain or a direct blow to the head, or it can be an indirect blow that causes the brain to move violently around inside the skull. And it causes a variety of symptoms that can be memory loss, loss of balance, just changes in behavior and mood. And it's really unique to the individual.
Concussions are an ongoing topic of research in sports medicine, but its notoriety has come by its close association with the National Football League. The general public typically only hears about the dangers of concussions, which leaves many fearful about the future of sports and the future of participants. But Dr. Thane Muntz, the Associate Director of the Sanford Science Institute, is trying to tackle some of the questions that will make concussions easier to understand. His research adds a younger twist to the conversation, one in which directly affects parents who have young children interested in putting football pads on for the first time.
We realized that there wasn't a lot of research that had been done with young football players. Most of the research had been done with college and professional athletes. And at that time, nobody really knew if playing football posed a risk to the brains of young football players. And we also wanted to look at the population that could potentially be affected the most. If you look at football participation rates in the United States, nearly 70% of all football players are younger than high school age. Yet it's the age group that we know the least about.
Sanford paired up with the South Dakota Junior Football Program to select their focus group, and since 2011, Dr. Muntz and his staff have zeroed in on one team within the senior division that consists of 7th and 8th graders.
After the first season that was a pilot study, we started to apply impact sensors to our study. So we put impact sensors in the helmets of the players. This sensor system can measure every time the helmet gets hit. It can register the number of impacts, the severity of impacts, and the location of impacts on the helmet. Within that sensor system, we also have a data logger and a transmitter that sends out information to our sideline response system.
So the question is, what do the amount of hits and the severity of hits tell us about young football players? The research team found, looking at middle school players on a hit-by-hit basis, the impact severity on the brain is nearly identical in the middle school population to that of high school football players, which was a surprising find considering the smaller size of middle school players and the slower speed at which the game is played. They also found the impact frequency, or the number of times they get hit in the head, is significantly less than a high school football player.
Over the course of our study, we've also had 6 subjects who have suffered physician-diagnosed concussions while participating in the study. And we've been able to monitor them throughout the recovery process. And we found that the time it takes for them to be cleared for full return to participation is about 30 days. And that's quite a bit longer than what's typically reported for adult athletes.
Despite the cultural apprehension felt toward concussions, the Sanford team has found great support in both the parents and the coaches. They understand the research isn't about turning participants away from football, but rather to preserve both the sport and the participant.
There's someone from Sanford at all of our practices and all of our games to monitor how things are going. Their role isn't to critique. Their role is to observe and gather facts and gather information on what's going on so that they can tabulate it, they can put their information together, and hopefully it helps youth football, high school football, the helmet developers, the Rydels and Schutz of the world, in how they can make the game safer for the kids so they continue playing.
I think we're just enhancing the game and making it a safer game. There is, like I said before, an attack on the game, whether it's all necessarily true or not. Without this kind of information and that, we don't really know. But anything we can do to make it safer, I'm all for that.
Dr. Muntz knows firsthand the positives of playing football. He played at Augustana until 1997.
There wasn't a lot of thought about concussion when I was playing. Most of the concern was about neck injuries. So when we were told to keep your head up, it was mainly so that you didn't break your neck. But people had concussions, and those weren't considered to be serious injuries. In fact, those were injuries that I remember people laughing about because people would act strange and couldn't remember, what you just asked them. It's in a strange position to be at, to look back as a former player and say, hey, I wonder if that happened to me, and it was just never recognized.
Although the research team at Sanford Institute of Sports Medicine still has many more questions to answer about concussions, the important thing is that the conversation continues and that the information is accessible for future parents and players.
I would advise parents not to be scared of concussions and to recognize that we have a much better understanding now of these injuries and that the sport is probably safer now than it ever has been. You really have to make an individual decision, what's right for your son and for your family, and try and gather as much information as possible.
Joined now by Carla Metz, and fascinating subject for one thing. Have there been any changes in South Dakota junior football based on what Dr. Muntz, his research, and maybe others?
Yeah, maybe not specifically his research, but all the concussion research out there has kind of helped to create what's called the Heads Up Football Program, which has been around for several years. It was started by USA Football, and it's just a program that helps teach and train coaches the proper tackling and blocking technique, and all the coaches in the South Dakota junior football program are certified in that, and they've seen a significant change in safety in the game because of that program.
Okay. Is there such thing as a safe position in football, on the line or the kicker or anybody?
Yeah, that's a good question, and Dr. Muntz and I kind of spoke on that, and here's the breakdown of what he said. He said quarterbacks and wide receivers don't get hit as often, but when they do, it's typically more severe because they're getting tackled at higher speeds. Linemen get hit very often, but it's typically less severe because it's at lower speeds, and then running backs and linebackers are kind of the worst of both worlds because they get hit often and get hit at a higher speed. So if you're looking for a safer position, you could argue that a lineman, maybe the big guys up front, maybe that they're the safest position.
All right, fascinating stuff. Thanks a lot, Carla Metz. Thanks for watching. You can find every episode of Midco Sports Magazine on YouTube.
This has been Midco Sports Magazine, presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.